As we age, we lose brain capacity. But what are the secrets to keeping your brain fit? Learn how to keep yourself sharp forever. And on our green tips, water conservation at home. Next on Living Smart. The chair of the Department of Neurobiology and Anatomy at the University of Texas Houston Health Science Center, Dr. John Byrne specializes in learning and memory. Recent neuroscience advances have shown the potential for conquering devastating diseases and disorders of the brain. Today, Dr. Byrne, who recently won the National Mental Health Research Scientist Award, discusses changes in the brain throughout life and what we need to do to keep our brains fit. Very interesting topic, Dr. Byrne.
Well, thank you.
Now, to understand the brain, it's really important to understand memory and the different types of memory. Tell me about that.
Exactly. Well, memory, we have a tendency to take memory for granted, but when you think about it, it's essential for everything we do and say. It's our past, it's our present, and our future. We really wouldn't have life without it. Memory is very diverse. If you just stop and think for a moment of, if I were to think of the kinds of memory operations that it took to get me here today,
right,
they're very vast. So when I woke up this morning, I had to remember, for example, that this was the day of the interview. And then once I did that, and the fact that I'm here is a good sign.
Right. Your brain was working.
And then once I did that, I had to rely on a whole other set of memory tasks. I had to remember how to drive my car. I had to remember the rules of the road, which some people have a lot of difficulty with.
Right,
you know?
sure.
And then once I arrived here, I had to draw upon a vast memory for the vocabulary, meanings of words and sounds, right, in order to uphold my end of the conversation.
Okay.
So it's very, very vast and rich. But despite all these various memory activities, neuroscientists have divided memory into two broad classes. There's the types of memories that are most familiar to us all, the types of memories for facts and events. Mm-hmm. So a fact like Paris is the capital of France, right, or an event like a prior vacation to Paris. These are memories that generally have a conscious component. Mm-hmm. Then there's this other class of memories called the non-declarative memories. These are memories for skills and habits, like riding a bicycle, playing golf, or playing a piano.
An instrument,
An instrument. They're very, very critical for our daily life, but we don't have a conscious component. We do these things automatically. You can't tell someone how you ride a bicycle. You just know how to do it.
Right. Where do scientists find memory in the brain? Is there a particular part of the brain that has to do with memory?
Well, that's an interesting question. I brought a model of the brain with me, and we like to think that there's one place in the brain where all the memories are located. Right. Like, for example, the structure back here, the cerebellum.
Okay.
But actually, we found, scientists have found, not just myself, but that memory is distributed in different parts of the brain.
Okay.
And in particularly, different parts of the brain store different types of memories.
Ah, okay. So memory has been compared to like a file cabinet.
Right. We like to think of memory, it's like taking a photograph and then placing it in a filing cabinet drawer for later retrieval exactly as it was placed there. Right. But actually, it's more like taking the photograph and tearing it up into little pieces and putting the pieces in different drawers. And then when we recall the memory, we need to associate those different pieces back together, and that forms the memory.
Okay.
I can give you a little memory test that
Let's
might
do it.
illustrate this.
You won't embarrass me, right?
No, I certainly
won't.
So I have a list of 15 words.
Okay.
And what I'll do is read the list of words.
Okay.
And the audience now should put their pens down if they're thinking about doing that.
Do the memory test.
So, and then we'll just wait a while.
Okay.
Slight pause, and then see if you recall the words on the list.
I'm pretty brain dead right now.
So here they are. Candy, sour, sugar, bitter, good, taste, tooth, nice, honey, soda, chocolate, heart, cake, eat, and pie.
This is making me feel good.
You got them all?
Yes.
Okay. So I would ask you now, is candy on the list?
I think so, yes.
That's very good.
Yes.
Now, the next one, how about car? Was car on the list?
I don't think so.
No, it wasn't. You're doing very, very well.
Oh, why?
Now, one more. Was sweet on the list?
I think so.
So let me read the list again. candy, sour, sugar, bitter, good, taste, tooth, nice, honey, soda, chocolate, heart, cake, eat, and pie.
Sweet wasn't in there, but it sure felt like it.
It sure did.
It was a sweet group of words.
Now, when you give this memory test, the same memory test, 95% of people who take the test will say that sweet was on the list.
Interesting.
They all have the same false memory. And why is that? It's because so many other words on the list had a sweet connotation,
right.
So you automatically associated a sweet with being on the list.
So what you're sharing with me is the associations that we make in the brain, and that helps our memory. So my next question is...
So, by the way, it's been linked, if you will, it's equivalent to what a paleontologist does when they reconstruct a dinosaur from the partial fragments of the bones. So if you give two sets of fragment bones to the same two different paleontologists, they'll both reconstruct a dinosaur because they know it has to be a dinosaur.
Yeah, right.
But the features will be somewhat different.
Okay. Now that leads to the next question, that is, what is neurogenesis?
Neurogenesis is an exciting new finding, and it describes the generation of new nerve cells. Now, why this is exciting is because not too long ago, just 10 or 15 years ago, we used to think that we have 100 billion nerve cells in this brain that we're born with.
Right.
It was previously believed that once we were born, we had that 100 billion set of nerve cells that we inherited, and there was no new nerve cells to be generated.
Oh.
But the recent new finding is that the brain is capable of generating, at least in specific parts of the brain, generating new neurons.
Which is hopeful, gives us hope.
It's very hopeful. It's very hopeful for the potential of treating neurological and brain disorders. So once we can understand that process better, we'll be able to tap into that process and repair and replace neurons that have been lost through disease or damage.
Now, back to memory. Why are some of our memories more permanent or well-defined and others are just fleeting?
This is an interesting question. Some memories are very fleeting and some memories are very enduring.
Right.
So you would be hard-pressed, I believe, to tell me what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago. I certainly couldn't do that, especially, and some of these things you don't want to remember, especially if, like me, you eat in the UT cafeteria. So,
you want to forget.
But other memories that seem important at the time, for example, family members who you had at your Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago, you have difficulty remembering. But other memories are very, very permanent. For example, you might not have ridden a bicycle in 20 years, but I'm sure you can get on one right away and do it pretty fine.
So far, so good.
Other memories are very enduring for other reasons. So if you're 60 or older, you probably remember exactly where you were when President Kennedy was shot.
Oh, yeah.
If you're older than 20, you probably remember exactly where you were when you heard about
9/11.
the 9/11, 2001. Right. So what this means is that memories that have an emotional component are particularly enduring.
Interesting. Okay. Now, how are memories made?
Well, memories are made by changing the strength of the connections between neurons. So we have in our brain those 100 billion neurons. And what makes the brain so special compared to other organs? Now, the liver has a lot of liver cells.
Right.
The brain has 100 billion nerve cells. But what makes the brain special is that those neurons are connected to each other in very specific ways. And that pattern of connections gives rise to the processing of information, the generation of behavior, and cognitive functions, including memory. Now, what happens during memory is that the strength of the connections between neurons gets modified. And so the memory is stored in the strength of the connection between a different neuron. And what's also fascinating, recent results indicate that a component of that strengthening of the connection is actually the growth of neurons. So to the extent that we remember anything about this interview tomorrow or the next day or a month from now, it's because at this very moment, changes in the structure of your neurons are taking place. They're growing new processes.
Okay, now let's talk about brain fitness and how do we create more neurological connections and how we keep our brains fit. What are some of the things we need to do?
Well, there's probably at least 3 factors that are important for brain fitness. One is the intellectual environment. So it's known that people who are college educated and who are otherwise intellectually active, both and socially active, have a lower incidence of Alzheimer's disease, for example. Mm-hmm. So this has led to the common phrase, use it or lose it.
Right, right.
And it's also been shown in animal studies that animals that are in so-called enriched environments have better learning capabilities. A second factor,
right.
There's probably three factors.
Okay.
A second factor is diet. We all know that diet is very important for cardiovascular health, but it's becoming increasingly clear that diet is also important for brain health. There's a lot of interest in the media about particular dietary components, for example, the omega-3 fatty acids that are found in fish like salmon, and the flavonoids, for example, that are found in green tea and cocoa and wine. The evidence is not all in. There's a lot of hype about this, but it seems as though some of those components are very, very important for maintaining brain health.
Yeah, I read blueberries, avocado, salmon, beta-carotene, the vitamin.
Right. So it's been shown in some animal studies, speaking about neurogenesis, that some of these antioxidants lead to increased neurogenesis in at least certain parts of the brain.
Chocolate, I hear. Is dark chocolate are very good for the brain? Oh, what a great excuse to eat chocolate all day, right?
The third factor, by the way, is exercise.
Right.
Now, exercise, we all know, is important for cardiovascular health. And because the brain gets a large portion of the blood supply from the heart, any interruption of that can be devastating. For example, it happens with a stroke. So automatically, being heart healthy means being brain healthy.
Right.
But it's becoming clear that exercise also has a direct effect on the brain. So, for example, people who exercise have a lower incidence of age-related brain disorders, including Alzheimer's disease.
Does it have to do with circulation to the brain and the blood vessels work better? What does it have to do with?
That's part of it. Exercise, at least in animal studies, it's been shown that exercise leads to the increased formation of blood vessels, a phenomenon called
increased formation.
Yes, angiogenesis. And why that's important, because the brain is so metabolically active that it needs a very rich blood supply. So the brain can't do anything without having the appropriate blood supply. But these substances also seem to have a direct effect on the properties of neurons. They're so-called plastic properties. So neurons are not like components in electric circuits. They're capable of changing, for example, the strength of their connections. And so exercise seems to promote that capability of the nervous system.
Is it inevitable that when you age, you lose brain capacity? Is that inevitable, or do we just assume that's the case?
There is a frequent age-related cognitive decline that is fairly common. However, there's some amazing exceptions to that. So there are people in their, and we don't understand why, but there are people in their 90s that have the cognitive capability of someone in their 20s.
Yeah, they did the study on the nuns somewhere. I don't know if you read about the study of the nuns that were in their 90s and they had great cognitive function, but they were always using their brain and studying and praying and meditating.
That's again the use it or lose it phenomenon. We need to exercise our brains just as we need to exercise our muscle.
Let's talk about memory loss. What is normal and what is not normal in memory loss? Because we're always worried, oh my gosh, I forgot my keys, or, you know.
Right. Everybody has the case where they forgot where their keys were placed. They've also forgot they have very difficulty remembering a name. That's normal. Now, what's not normal is if you forget what your keys are for. Then there's a problem.
That's a problem. Not where your keys are, but where your keys are from. That's a good point.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Now, we need to, there's this general age-related decline in cognitive function, but then we have specific diseases that affect memory. For example, the big one is Alzheimer's disease that everyone is so concerned about. And it really is a very, very tragic disease. More than 4 million Americans have this, and this is associated with a general decline in cognitive function, but more specifically, memory loss.
Isn't dementia more of a problem than Alzheimer's, though?
Well, that's one of the major features of Alzheimer's disease. It's dementia.
Okay.
Loss of memory.
Now, why is it in brain function that forgetting is just as important as remembering?
Well, we'd like to think, if I can just preface that by saying, we like to think that it would be great to have a perfect memory.
Right.
But when you think about it, there's some things that you really don't want to remember. We already talked about that lunch that you had 2 weeks ago. But psychiatrists spend a lot of time trying to help people forget memories. And this is really exemplified by people coming back from the battlefield situations where they have these horrible experiences that they can't forget.
Now, why is it that we lose? You said that over time you do lose cognitive function, but why is it that we lose brain capacity? Does something happen physically to the brain that causes this to happen?
We don't know exactly.
Okay.
One thing that seems to happen is that the strength of those connections becomes weaker. That's why, again...
Okay, you need to reconnect.
You have to keep exercising those connections, if you will, to maintain their strength, and therefore your normal brain function.
How would you define successful aging of the brain?
Well, successful aging of the brain is staying sharp and staying intellectually active and alert and socially engaged.
You said the key is exercise, of course, and we talked about the intellectual, learning new things and maybe going back to college or whatever. What about the social component? I hear that they've done studies on people that have like 5 social components, whether it's family, the church, the community, and those people tend to do much better than people that do not have so many social connections.
Right. I don't know the details of those studies. I've heard about them, as you have, and it certainly seems to be a factor, but exactly how social behavior gets involved in brain health, it's not particularly clear. But it's presumably part of the fact that when you're engaged socially, you're drawing upon a vast array of brain mechanisms and you're exercising them again.
Because you're using different parts of the brain by being with different types of people or
you have to recall their
situations?
names, you have to use your vocabulary, you learn new things just by interacting with people.
And I understand travel is really important for brain fitness.
Travel? I don't know about travel, but did you say travel?
Traveling, yeah.
I'm sure it can hurt.
Oh, I think because you're taking out of your comfort zone. Going out of your comfort zone is good.
Again, that's what the studies indicate.
Getting out of your comfort zone. Neuro research advances to show the potential for conquering devastating brain diseases.
Well, we are really on the threshold of a very exciting area. Brain diseases are very, very devastating. One we've already talked about is Alzheimer's disease. Currently, more than 4 million Americans have Alzheimer's disease. And currently, the cause is not known, and there is no cure, and the treatments are pretty minimal. But there's a tremendous amount of research going on in this field, and I think within the near future, the next couple of years, there will be a much better array of therapies for Alzheimer's disease. We're also starting to learn about the specific genes and proteins that underlie various brain disorders.
Talking about proteins, I understand that a diet higher in carbohydrates and lower in proteins is better for the brain. Is that proven?
I don't know about that.
Okay, all right.
Certainly,
that's what I read, but I wasn't sure.
Certainly the brain, because it has such a high metabolic rate, it needs a lot of glucose. So glucose is very important for the brain.
What's new in biotechnology with regards to brain treatments and maintaining cognitive function?
Well, in terms of biotechnology, one of the big developments is brain imaging. And so we're now in a position where we can use a technique called functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, where it's possible to see, if you will, areas of the brain that are active. So we're understanding the particular areas of the brain that are engaged in various activities much better. And that then puts us in a position where knowing a critical thing about treating brain diseases is to know where in the brain those diseases are occurring. Because you have, again, this huge structure. And brain diseases, in general, don't affect the entire brain. They affect specific structures. And so it's important to know the structures of the brain that are involved before you can apply technologies to treat those structures.
In your lifetime as a brain scientist, what do you think has been the greatest breakthrough in the past 30 years?
Well, one of the important breakthroughs is this idea of brain plasticity.
Right.
So
which brain plasticity means?
The ability of the brain to change.
Okay,
right?
okay.
And because we used to think that once the brain developed,
that's it.
That was it. But now we know that it has this enormous capability to change. And one aspect of that is that the individual neurons that are there, they can change. And the other aspect of that is this neurogenesis, where we can generate these new neurons, at least in some parts of the brain. So that's very, very exciting.
Can medication improve neurogenesis in any way?
Well, I don't know about medication, but certainly exercise seems to stimulate.
So far natural stuff is what you need to do.
Right.
What about parents?
Now, once we understand that neurogenesis phenomenon in greater detail, we'd be able to tap into the mechanisms and then manipulate it.
Now, I understand also that there's the sense of control and the sense of purpose is really important for you to maintain brain function. Having a purpose in your life, having a mission in your life. That's sort of more of a psychological thing, I would think.
It certainly is important, but exactly how it taps into those...
we don't know.
We don't know.
It's just a good idea anyway,
we don't know.
Right?
It's a good idea anyway. Just like being intellectually active and being socially active. And exercising is a good idea. It's good for your heart and it's good for your brain. So you can't go wrong. And the interesting thing, if I could just add, is that studies have shown that the combination of exercise and diet are additive. So if you do the two together, it's better than any one by itself.
And also I read that learning new instruments is really important. Learning a new language or learning a new instrument.
Again, it's challenging the brain. It's keeping the brain active and it's keeping those connections formed and it's helping to develop new connections.
Now, let's talk about babies and brains. Is there anything parents need to know about making sure those kids get the best brain possible for their life?
Well, there's probably three important factors. One is the environment, and I think everybody knows about that by now. We wouldn't have a Mozart unless someone gave him a piano and at least that first piano lesson. And we wouldn't have Einstein if he did not have a proper education in math and physics. So that intellectual environment is very, very critical. And animal studies have shown that a rich environment also promotes this neurogenesis again.
Exactly.
So that's one factor that's critical, important. And another one, big one, of course, is diet. Everybody knows that diet's important for the development of the body, but it's very, very clear that diet is very, very important for brain development. So malnutrition is obviously a very, very devastating condition in many parts of the world. Fortunately, we don't have that in America. But what we do have is bad nutrition. And too many children are being exposed to diets that are high in saturated fats and high in sugar. Exactly. Now, what does that mean? That leads to obesity. And it's been estimated that there are about 20% of children are obese. Now, obesity at an early age leads to a high probability of being obese at a later age. And why is obesity bad? It's bad because it leads to type 2 diabetes. And it's been estimated, I read a recent statistic from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that children born in the year 2000, 1 of 3 children born in the year 2000 will become obese. Now, obesity is a major predictor of type 2 diabetes.
Now, how do you know you're living smart?
I know, well, as a neuroscientist, I know I'm living smart because I'm staying smart. And staying smart, staying sharp. And staying sharp means using your brain to know that you need to do something about it. And more importantly, using your brain to do something about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. And now in our Green Tips, Water Conservation at Home with Carol Baker, Chair of the Alliance for Water Efficiency.
Water conservation, it's a very sustainable way to help the environment and saving energy and water combined inside the home and outside the home. It is very important, especially here in the States and around the country, because our economic base is based on how much water we have in different places. This kit contains some things that you can do around your home. This is a high-efficiency shower head that reduces your water use. This is an aerator for your kitchen faucet that will reduce the water use there. This is for the bathroom faucet. This is tape measure to check for leaks in your toilet. And this is for outdoor measuring the amount of water going on in your yard. There are many ways to cut water waste inside the home. You can put high-efficiency shower heads on. Make sure your toilets are not leaking. Of course, you can always turn off the water when you brush your teeth or shave, and that's an easy one. But high-efficiency washing machines save a tremendous amount of water. That's the second largest water user in the home outside of the toilet. And then outside, educate yourselves on your outdoor water use and make sure you're not overwatering and wasting.
To learn more about green tips and brain fitness, go to our website. There you'll find a complete resource list. You can also email us or call us with your comments at 713-743-8513. And that's our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to live smart. I'm Patricia Gras. Have a great week.
For a transcript of this program, send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.